Are you a service-based business owner looking to increase profits to fund your lifestyle? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now, over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you're a first-time listener and you love what you hear, please subscribe. If you're a regular, I really appreciate your feedback and continue to give it to me. So today's guest is someone who is a serial entrepreneur. He's actually written 5 best-selling Amazon books, and he's about to have the next one. Well, it's actually on Amazon. You can get it now, but it's fast approaching a bestseller. So he's very prolific with his book writing, but he's also prolific around the idea of marketing, in particular compound marketing. He's got some brilliant ideas in this podcast, and I know you're going to get enormous value out of it. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Dan Norris from dannorris.me and also blackhobbs.com.au. Welcome, Dan Norris from Black Hobbs to the Build, Live, Give podcast. Dan, great to have you on board.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, look, I've sort of followed your journey for a while. I know we were both in James Schramko's group, Super Fast Business and Silver Circle, and I've sort of followed your path. And, you know, I always remember a fantastic presentation you gave on everything you shouldn't do in business for 7 years. And then you said, this is what you should do, which turned out on a nice exit that I mentioned in the intro to GoDaddy. But today I really want to, focus on this compound marketing concept you've got. I know you've recently launched a book last year, and really love to learn about that. So, let's just kick off with what's compound marketing to you?
Yeah, well, I guess it came out of just kind of reflecting on businesses I'd had and the way I'd built those businesses kind of blindly at the time, just kind of writing blog posts, investing in the brand, building a community around what I was doing. These things that and telling my story as well, that ultimately ended up in a good outcome, like you said before, with the sale. But at the time, I didn't really realize I was doing it. I was just kind of doing a form of marketing that I thought was fun, and I thought I was reasonably good at in terms of writing blog posts and whatnot. And after the experience selling the business and then building this new business with the brewery, I just kind of reflected on, what were the components of what I was doing that were kind of unique, and came up with, content, community, brand, and story. And those were the things that I'd basically done in all of my businesses to build a business without spending money on paid advertising or, to potentially build up a core marketing engine that didn't require spending money. Therefore, when you did do paid advertising spend, it was, it wasn't all that you're doing, and it was a lot more effective because you're not just doing it all the time, which is more kind of where I'm getting to now with our business, where we are doing a little bit of paid marketing, but it's kind of good for us because we've got most of our marketing coming through free channels, and we're not saturating people with paid channels.
Yeah. And had you been burnt by paid before, or you just knew that organic, the longer term, was the right way to go?
There's quite a bit about content and building a brand and telling a story that I resonate with. I just like the idea. I like the idea of doing content that's useful for people. I think it's smart to build your brand as opposed to trying to flog a bad brand. Yeah. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I think, and community, every business I've had has always had like a good community around it, kind of getting people behind what you're doing. All of that just seemed logical to me, and paid advertising just seemed really difficult, really hard to get any kind of ROI. It wasn't something I was particularly good at. Yeah. And yes, burnt for sure. For years and years, tried lots and lots of different options for marketing and never really got anywhere with it. Just found most of it was a waste of time and money. And I kind of felt that if you're gonna do some kind of paid marketing, you're almost better just to pick one and be really good at it. And I just wasn't really particularly good at any of those things. Yeah. So I had to find another way to market a business that didn't involve doing, Facebook ads and Google ads.
Yeah, look, I've got to say that resonates with me. And been burned as well. And in 2019, I sort of got out of my transplant and I was like, okay, time to market my business. And lucky for me, LinkedIn sort of came along. Not that it hadn't been around a lot, but there was a lot of benefit of organic still on LinkedIn, and that really played to me, which was, great content, and then the crowds or the people will come. But
yeah, I think for me, it probably went back to Google, the early days of kind of SEO, where this is well before WP Curve and Black Ops. I had just a website agency, and I had a website that used to rank on the front page of Google for keywords like website design and web design and keywords like that. And I just used to look at how much companies would pay for those keywords. I don't know how much it is now. It's probably a lot, but back then it was about $5 per click. And I was getting all this free traffic just from ranking naturally and organically, just from this website that ranked well, that wasn't costing me a cent. And to me, that just seemed like so much better than competing literally, to the dollar with other people. Like, who can pay more is whoever gets this traffic. Just seemed like a really bad way to go about things, especially when, my offering was reasonably low price. So I couldn't spend $5 for every single click on my website. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So from that point on, I was sort of like, well, how do I get natural, organic, qualified sort of people to pay attention to what I'm doing, as opposed to just throwing money at something and hoping you can outbid your competition.
Yeah. Look, that's good. And, I know a lot of, I work with a lot of service-based business owners, consultants, tech resellers, outsourcers, etc. And they really get confused by SEO. And I got to admit, I sort of sit in that bucket as well. Given all your expertise, what tips have you got for someone listening like me that, sort of don't know whether they should be in and out of SEO and find it all a bit confusing?
Yeah, to be honest, my advice hasn't changed in I don't know how long ago. A number of years ago, I wrote a blog post on WP Curve, which is not there anymore. I don't think any of that content is live anymore. But it was something like the Guide to Content-Driven SEO, and it was basically just saying, set up your blog so the pages are optimized, which is super easy. That's like a one-off job that anyone can do. And then just put out good content. And that's what I did. That's all I've done since. I haven't done any activity that you would call SEO in many, many years. It's really, and we rank for all kinds of keywords. We outrank every brewery for lots and lots of different terms, because we're one of the only breweries that are putting out valuable content. And it was the same with the WordPress support side of things. We're ranking for all kinds of keywords, just from putting out good content. And that's been my advice for 5+ years or more. I can't remember how many years ago that was. And that just remains the same. I think the whole thing's just a massive distraction, waste of time. Unless you're really particularly good at it, which some people are, yes. It's just a money pit and a waste of time and a worthless exercise that's only just wasting your time and other people's time. I much prefer the idea of, creating a lot of useful content around these topics, and then it's, worst case, it doesn't send you any leads, but it does help other people, yes. Which is great. And then, it's also going to elevate your brand if you are helping other people, because it's kind of adding into the karma of it all. It's not the kind of marketing you learn about at marketing school. Having been to marketing school, I know that. Yeah. But that's my preferred way to market a business, and it's been very effective for me.
And, you talk about good content. So, has that changed as far as, with video obviously becoming a lot more predominant than what it was, when you're in WP Curve, et cetera? What have you seen change around what good is now versus what it was then?
It's certainly changed a lot. I mean, I still don't do really much at all with video. Didn't then, and I don't now. We kind of stick to what we're good at. But if you look at the way people's attention is now with social media and these reels and, the Clubhouse, the Twitter Spaces, all of that kind of stuff. It's just, everything is changing massively, but it's still kind of, the concept's still kind of the same. There's like a whole bunch of people that probably want this information or this story or whatever, and you give it to them in whatever way that meets the best balance between what they want and what you're good at producing. So, I've never been particularly good at video. We don't do a lot of video, but we do podcasts, we do written blog posts, we do social media posts, we do emails, and all of those are pretty old school. They've been the same for quite a while, well before we started this business. and all are still very effective for me. I think the people who are really good at video are doing really well now, which is great because it's a real skill.
Yes.
But, I still don't believe that you should be doing a whole bunch of different things just because it's popular, if you're not good at them or if you can't get good at them or don't want to. I've always had the belief that you do what you find rewarding personally. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be good at it, and what you are good at. And hopefully those two things line up, or there is like a bit of an intersection where they line up.
Yeah, and I think you said it beautifully before. It's got to be useful content, right? I think so many people get caught in the platform, they forget how useful the content is. So I think it doesn't really matter. We all, yes, we've got a preferred medium, but we'll take content from any platform or any source as long as it's good, right? As long as it's useful and it gets you results. So I think that's the key. And, you talked about, there's sort of 4 parts to your book, but first one is brand. And I know you're huge on design and the importance of design. Why is that the case? Why do you think design is so critical in a brand, whether it's your personal brand or whether it's, for you, Black Hobbs with your beer brand?
I just think it's really low hanging fruit. Like, I just think most entrepreneurs aren't good at it. They don't really understand it. They don't value it. And in everything that I've done in markets that are really competitive, the brand ends up being the thing that is the difference between someone choosing you or not choosing you, or someone paying a lot more, than they otherwise would. And to me, it's really, really good opportunity for entrepreneurs, because most people will just like put logos on Facebook and ask for people's feedback, or just get some local designer to design something and sign off whatever they do. And that's not how it works here. Like I'm intimately involved in every single branding decision. We use really good designers for things. If we don't think we can do it well, we won't do it at all. And we put an enormous, I spend a huge amount of my time designing beer cans and limited releases and God knows what else, because that's ultimately, people are buying into the brand and it's super important. And I think if it's like in our industry, it's super competitive, and you could say the same thing about WordPress support with my old business. Like, it started getting really, really competitive, and we had to have the best offering, the best looking website, the best brand, the most trustworthy company. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked because there were so many other people doing the same thing.
Yes.
And what I'm doing at the moment is exactly the same. Like, our product costs a lot to make. It's expensive. There's 700 other craft breweries in Australia that people can choose from. When you go to a bottle shop, you see shelves after shelves after shelves with thousands of cans on them. It's super competitive, and you need to have good design. It's just a no-brainer. And the good thing to me, I think, is that most companies don't have good design, and it's a really good opportunity for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. And, my background's Coca-Cola, so you talking to the converted here, and and the amount of research that the Coke company did and how they went about their branding, to the degree that if anyone ever missed the hyphen in Coca-Cola, it was like World War III for a customer. Like, how dare they miss the hyphen? And I'm like, most people call it Coke, right? But they had guidelines. They had very specific. It was like a DNA of each brand, and you had to follow that. So I agree with that. And it's no difference to coaches and consultants, like you said. First impressions, they really count. And, there's lots of us out here. There's lots of service providers. How are you going to stand out? And I think brand is key. And you one of the sub chapters in your book is, to avoid the brand killers. So what are they? What are the brand killers?
I think just to double back on the branding thing in terms of where I really started being interested in it. I think like in our world, when we're kind of doing services or online businesses or whatnot, design isn't really something that people really care too much about. And I noticed that just following the startup world, all these startups that were starting in San Francisco, the Ubers and the Lyfts and Teslas, like all these kind of companies, I mean, they're the big examples, but even the smaller ones, like design was such an important thing for these companies. And you can see like almost always they'll have some kind of design person on the founding team or like as part of the original group of people. It's really rare for these companies to just start and be like, oh, let's get a designer to outsource some work for that. Like that's not how they work.
Yes.
So I think that's worth considering, because these are the companies that, that ultimately are the ones that end up becoming the Coca-Colas and whatnot. So if they're taking it seriously, it's probably a good sign. Brand killers, I don't know in terms of like listing off 50 different things, but I just think that the number one thing is care about the brand. I think, doing anything that distracts from people liking something, I think is not good. Like I think excessive pop-ups on websites and just excessively asking for things, excessive paid promotion, I think can detract from your brand as well. Because if you go into a social media, so say you go into Facebook, you're just constantly seeing ads for a particular company. It's just constantly spamming you. It's kind of like, I think this is actually detracting from the brand. I don't think it's actually helping. And I guess, like I think in the book, I do talk about what is a brand. It is basically how people feel about what you offer. And you can kind of capture that in the way you design things. But ultimately, if you're doing things that give people negative feelings about what you do, then it's going to destroy your brand no matter what it looks like.
Yeah, and it's all these touch points now. I think, the key thing is every touch point, like you said, it could be an email, it could be whatever that is detracting from you. And, you can often see people that are, sporadic and they're testing lots of things, which is great, but often the things they're testing and some of the experts aren't in line with their brand. So that's why I think having that as the core, the heart, and then you go from there is really important. And, you talk about stories, with some of the stories that you've been doing, even in Black Hobbs, which are the stories that work better than others? Like, is there any tips you can give us around storytelling?
Yeah, I think, for us, or for me, the kind of the founding story of the business has always been the most powerful one. So with WP Curve, it was this, story of, you mentioned, 7 years of failure. I think you mentioned before the call, I'd sort of started a business that had gone really badly. I'd been failing really badly. And then everything went well. I turned it around. And that kind of founding story with WP Curve was really powerful. With our current business, the same thing was true. It was a classic story of me with two mates sitting around a bar talking about brewing a beer. We ended up doing it, and that ended up becoming our brand and turning into, one of the top craft breweries in the country. And that's just a cool story, it's kind of the beer story. It's like blokes sitting around the pub talking about beer, and then they build a brewery. So those have always been really powerful for me, but I do in the book go through different options for stories, because I don't think that's always going to be the way to go to tell your founding story, especially if, if someone else comes into the market now and has an exact same founding story as us, it's not going to be as powerful because we've told this story so many times. Or if their story just isn't as good, isn't as genuine, then they'll have to think of something else. And there's lots of other options. We use customer stories quite a bit. So, customers that come up with beer ideas that where they can be the kind of hero of the whole thing. That's a bit of fun. And then product stories could be anything to do with the product that just is interesting in some way. It could be the founding story of the product. It could be, it serves a particular purpose. It could have been invented in some fun way. Those are probably the three big ones: the founding stories, customer stories, and product stories.
Yeah, brilliant. And, you talked about community. I know that's another key thing. And you've, always built a community. And like I said, we met each other through a community run by James. But, tell us a little bit about some of the things you've learned by building communities across multiple things. WP Curve, completely different industry to Black Hobbs. What are the similarities? What's the core that you can share?
Yeah, well, it's very powerful for our business because from day one, we were kind of sharing our story. We were getting other people behind what we're doing. We were really transparent with what we were doing, releasing recipes and, financial information and all kinds of stuff. And that really built up a core group of people who aren't necessarily in a specific one location, although we do have that as well. But it's more that there's just a lot of people out there who have gotten behind what we're doing. And that could be people who come into the tap room, which is obviously a really obvious one. If you've got a bar, that's a community. Yes. But we've also got a Facebook group of our ambassadors, which is 2,500 people in there and super active. We've got 550 actual equity investors from doing equity crowdfunding. Email list of, I can't remember, 10,000 plus. I can't remember how many's on there. Facebook, social media communities. There's communities all around what we do. Email list is still really powerful. And And it's been really powerful for us. So we have things like where, people have to vote for the best brewery in the survey, that kind of stuff. And last year we were voted the number one in the country. And we're definitely not the biggest in the country. We're far from it. But we do have a really engaged group of people who are behind what we're doing. And that's when it becomes really powerful, because we've got all these advocates out there who can basically promote our business for us. And in return, we give them, we involve them in what we're doing. And it's a fun thing for them to be involved in a beer company, as opposed to just kind of seeing a fake advertisement on TV and then building some kind of bond with the product. In this case, we'll go as far as, brewing actual beers that are suggested by people in the community, or collaborating with different groups in our community. And that's a level of involvement that people don't really have with companies. And it results in a whole lot of love for the brand and a really active group of people.
Yeah, and look, I'm the same. So, to me, if you've got a services-based business and you want to scale it up, normally, you take one-on-one to group. That's a pretty, obvious one. But then, normally you've got the pathway of community versus online courses. And for me personally, I love creating communities. So I've got a large community where we help each other get leads through social selling. But, I think, everyone's always used the term, you join for the product, but you stay for the community. I think that's, so powerful. And was it sort of the chicken or the egg? Was it like you were always going to do that strategy, or was it, a clear point of difference versus your competitors? Because I've been in their shoes, and this is not something that they're typically very good at.
Right. No, it was something we did from day one. It was, it was very comfortable to me coming from that online world where this was very normal. Like back when I was doing it, I was doing income reports and sharing all of the information. I had a Facebook group that with the online or the services businesses, that wasn't particularly new. There was a lot of people were doing it. A lot of startups, Pat Flynn was doing his income reports.
Yeah, John Lee
Dumas, started doing them after that. And then like Bear Metrics and the like had their kind of public dashboards, and all of this trend was sort of happening in the online world. It just hadn't really translated to what we do. So to me, it was kind of natural. I mean, it's still, sometimes you do kind of worry a little bit when you publish something that's so public that there could be a downside to doing that. So it's not completely easy for me to do. I was going to
ask that. Have you come across any downsides as yet?
There's downsides. I think there's downsides in anything that you do. But to me, it's reasonably natural to kind of take this approach. And, it was like that from day one. But yeah, there's definitely downsides. Like we've put together some posts where we sort of thought, should we, like releasing recipes, for example, like we've put all of our recipes out there. We've given people the ability to brew them at home. Really makes the community really happy. We've got a core group of home brewers that love what we do. But, there of course is a downside to releasing your recipes, because, anyone else can then make them.
Yes.
So it's not always 100% upside, but I've always had the approach that this is generally a good approach to building a brand and building a good bit of love for what you do. And ultimately that is going to be a good thing. And I've always thought, it's a little bit of risk, but the benefit outweighs the cost. And if you don't have that mindset, it's really not going to work. If you've got that kind of old school mindset where you keep everything close to your chest and you occasionally write a little bit of a blog post on something, it's not going to work. You need to go all in.
Yeah, and I know that you sort of talk about, bend the rules as one of the key components to building community. Is that an example where, most companies would never release their ingredients, but you have, because you're bending the rules of the industry? Is that an example of what you mean by bending the rules?
I think the bend the rules example was more sort of like, if you have everything really rigid, like if you have like a set community with really rigid set rules, it just feels a bit more, it feels a bit too structured and a bit too artificial. Yeah. Whereas if you kind of occasionally dip into the community and do something random, then it feels more genuine, because it is. Sometimes I will just feel like going into the group and giving away some hats or something, and people really like that.
Yes.
And because it's a genuine thing, it's like I feel like doing something that's going to be fun for the group, and it's not all just based around rules, and not all for the purpose of marketing. It's just genuinely I care about the people in the group and want to do something for them. So sometimes I bend the rules. And I think that just makes the whole thing a little bit more genuine.
Yeah. And, I know, once again, it seems like a lot of, well, what I know of you, your personality is really coming out in the company and the brands versus, what the clients need. Like, is it fortuitous that the two match, or, did you come with you and the brand attributes first and then the consumer? I'm just interested in the way that that's worked, or has it just worked, serendipitously, if I could say that word?
I started the business. So, we started it with this in mind. We kind of sat around with Eddie and Govs and just said, like, this is what we're doing. Do you guys mind if I write all these blog posts and release all this information? They were always on board with the idea. It wasn't like I was fighting them for the whole time. So it was just the way we did things from day one. And, I always thought it would be helpful for other people to read some of this content and be part of the journey. But I also knew it was marketing. Yes. And, it's worked very well for us. I don't know if you would call it serendipitous because, I'd done it before. It is marketing.
Yes.
But it's, and it is kind of my personality coming out to some extent, but it's also been an approach that the other founders were very comfortable with as well. I think if you were starting a business that was, or going into a business that is much more traditional, and, the other guys have worked in some of these businesses that are way more traditional with their marketing, yes, would never do any of this stuff. And that's really difficult. That's going to be hard to turn around. But when the three founders are all in, then it's easy.
Yeah, great. And look, I know we talked a lot about useful content at the start, but just the last question on this is, around podcasts. Obviously, I've put out, I think you're about 280 episode number now, but
I feel way less special now, but that's a lot of episodes.
Hey, I saved the best to last, right? You're the last person I've interviewed. So
that's true.
How's that?
That's good.
But what's your view on podcasting and how that, whether it's a service business or like you've got a physical product business, where do you see podcasting fitting into the overall marketing mix?
Yeah, well, I was going to say before when you said about being useful, I think there's, the content doesn't have to be useful. It being useful can work well, but being entertaining sometimes and just kind of engaging and relevant is sometimes just as good, if not better. And like in our case, we will do the occasional blog post on, how to get the right water chemistry for your brews, which that's an example of something that's useful. It's useful to a very small group of people because most of our customers don't brew their own beer. But the small group that do, this is extremely useful. But to be honest, like if we were to go through all of our content that we've done, especially on social media and what went really well, it's not always the useful stuff. And for my own personal preference, when I listen to podcasts, I often don't, and I've been saying this for years, and I think it's really starting to become obvious now that podcasts very much, in a lot of cases, are very much about entertainment. And there, you're competing now with, like, when you open your phone, you've got Netflix and Amazon and Spotify and the podcast app and all of these different things that you're competing with. It's all the social media apps. To me, it's got to be more than just providing something useful. And if you're podcasting on a topic, providing useful stuff, especially if it's just you doing it and you're not interviewing someone else, it's probably going to be really boring.
Yeah.
So like when I'll give you a very specific example.
As long as it's not my podcast, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, as I say, like sometimes being useful is good, but you do interviews. So to me, I would much rather listen to an interview, even if it's not particularly useful. It might just be inspiring. It might be, this one might be useful for someone. Maybe it's just inspiring for someone who wants to build a brewery with their mates.
Yes.
But, like the podcasts I listen to are very much evolving now. Like it used to be very much around what's useful, interview podcasts, and that was basically it. But now when I look at my podcasts, the ones I'm really into are all pretty entertaining in their own way. So to give a business example, Jason Calacanis does This Week in Startups. That's a podcast I've been listening to for as long as I've been listening to podcasts. It's always been one of my favorite podcasts.
Yes.
And he does another one now called the All In Podcast, which is him and 4 or 5 of his best friends basically arguing the whole time about stuff. And I listen to way more of that one than I do This Week in Startups, because This Week in Startups now, it's more traditional interviews. The other one is all useful content, but it's also got a fair bit of drama. They're arguing a lot of the time. It's kind of fun. it's funny, and that gets the edge for me. I would rather listen to that than the plain interviews. So I think don't get too caught up in being useful, especially on mediums like podcasting and social media, where people want to be entertained. If you can do both, then that's great. If you can do some element of entertainment and education, and that's the podcast I tend to like. So the All In's a good example. The when I think about it, I listen to Pivot, which is Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway, and I listen to Jay Cal, and those guys both hate each other, but they're talking about the same stuff. Like there's so many podcasts talking about startups. Like, why do I listen to them? Really, because I find them both entertaining. I find Jay Cal entertaining. I find Scott seems pretty batshit crazy, but he's funny.
Yes.
And it's a good way to get your education if you can get it with entertainment at the same time. So that's something to think about. I sort of started thinking about that when that startup podcast came out by Gimlet, and they started doing the real sort of documentary style stuff. And I'm listening to one now. It's an Australian Financial Review one. And that kind of stuff is really going well now. And I think that's the future of these mediums and social media as well, because it's like people really, it's really hard to get people's attention now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, we're talking to Dan Norris, and you can find out more at dannorris.me. But before we go into the live section with Dan, I'd like to talk to you about if you've got the sales machine to meet or exceed your ambitions. I've got a quick assessment. It's 14 questions, 3 minutes. And at the end, you get the opportunity to actually jump on a call. And it's not a BS sales call. It's actually where I'll go through the gap analysis of what you've got versus what you need as far as your sales machine and give you some very specific advice. So just go to paulhigginsmentoring.com/assessment. So Dan, the live section. So what are some daily habits that you do every day to help you be successful? Other than testing beer, of course.
Yeah, testing beer. I don't, to be honest, I don't really have like a routine daily habits thing. I have a pretty good life. I get up, I get a coffee, I'll go down the beach.
Yeah.
Come into work, do my work. I don't really believe in set habits. if you can have some sort of balance, that's good. I do what I love every day, so I'm way ahead of 99% of people in that regard. And that, if you can do that, then that's good for me.
Yep. The next is the give section. So what's a charity or a community that you're passionate about and why?
That's a good one. I wasn't really prepared for this one. We do, I probably don't really have a specific one, but we have a community program where every month we do something for a different group, and we're sort of doing that a little bit more than monthly now. But because Black Ops has a military connotation, we do a little bit with military organizations, return veterans and that kind of thing. We do a little bit with sort of mental health organizations, Beyond Blue and places like that. What we normally do is, and it's probably not relevant for this section, but we have like a staff beer, and that staff chooses their own charity to do like a karma keg where we donate all the profits to that charity. But yeah, I don't think we don't really have a specific one that we choose, but we just do a whole bunch of different ones, generally around mental health, veterans, and yeah, they're probably the two main categories.
Yeah, great. And the last section's the rapid fire section. I'll ask you a question, get a rapid fire response. So the first one, what are your top 3 personal effectiveness tips?
Okay. Well, number 1 is delegate, because if I have to do it myself, it's probably not going to happen very quickly. Get a good team and delegate. Like I said before, doing what you love, if I wasn't doing what I loved, I would not be effective at all. And people may not think of it that way, but it's just really hard to be effective at something you don't love doing. So if you can figure out a way of doing something that you really enjoy, delegating the rest, that's going to put you a lot more effective than the average person. I think be flexible as well. That's probably the third one. I'm pretty flexible in where I work and how I work.
Yeah.
And I've never really thought coming in and working 9 to 5 was very easy for me. I kind of struggle to concentrate for that amount of time in the one space. So I tend to work late at night on some things, during the day as well. Just be flexible with where I work, when I work. Guard my time really. That's probably 4th thing, is just guard my time really carefully. I don't accept meetings. I don't do many podcast interviews. I don't very rarely have anything on my calendar. And just don't give up my time too easily. That's that was 4, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Four's better than 2. So as far as tech, what's a piece of technology that's pretty essential running your business?
Slack would be the number one. But yeah, we have, we did a blog post on this probably a year ago. We have so many different pieces of software to run this business. It would blow your mind. Yeah, Slack, all day, every day. I think I've got over 70 channels in here. We've got 60 plus staff. There's just so much that goes into that thing.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah,
that's probably number one.
Your Slack is my Asana, but same thing or similar thing. So the best source of new ideas for you?
Sorry, say that again.
Best source of new ideas for you?
Oh, new ideas. I don't know. I think we have, like, for beer ideas and branding ideas, we have the community, the groups in the community that give us ideas. Yeah. I tend to think of most of my ideas at nighttime. Quite often I'll think of them and then put them in a note or a task for the following day, just so I'm not spamming my business partners on Slack late at night, but also just to be like, well, I get quite excited about things in the moment, and I always just want to give myself 24 hours just to make sure it is good, and not to overload people as well, because our guys have got so much to work on. If I introduce something new, it's just another thing for them to work on. So normally I don't struggle to come up with ideas. It's more about just filtering them, making sure they're really going to be worth spending time on, and giving myself a kind of 24-hour or 12-hour period where I just make sure I am actually keen on it.
Yeah, I used to think the exact same thing. So, let's say I'd catch up with someone twice a week, right? In a quick whip, I'd always have a list of things that I wanted to talk about. And before it, so when I thought of it, I'd put it on there. And then I'd review it prior to the meeting, like 3/4 of them I'd get rid of. But yeah, so you didn't, whereas my last boss used to send 200 emails a day. So one day he said, I've got something to do. I said, oh, that's cool. I said, that's great. You want me to do something? I said, can you just help me with one thing first, though? And he said, oh, what's that? I said, out of these, and I brought in, he goes, what the hell's that? I said, they're the emails you sent me yesterday, right? This stack. I said, can you help me work out which one's more important, the one you're going to give me or the 200 that you've already sent me? He goes, okay, I got your point. So, yeah. Anyway, the last question's the big one. I always leave it to the end. But what impact do you want to leave on the world?
Yeah, I wasn't really prepared for that question. And to be honest, this is, again, not really something I ever think about. I always hear people thinking about that. I just don't really think about it that often. I think because I had so many years of kind of just not doing well at anything, I'm just very grateful to have a good business, provide for a lot of families, have a lot of fun in what I'm doing, be a good parent. That's enough for me. I don't really think there's any impact that I will have after I'm around that I am concerned about at all. And I don't know, maybe that's not the answer you want, but that's... No,
but I think the biggest thing for me is when I first met you, you were basically talking about how you weren't having the impact you wanted, i.e., my business wasn't quite where you want it. Now it is, and you're continuing to grow. I follow your success of Black Hops. You're doing a great job. You've got, 6 books that people can get some really entertaining and useful content. Let's put it that way. And there is the compound marketing that you can get on Amazon, and you can also find out more of Dan at Dan Norris with 2 R's .me online. But Dan, wonderful having you on the show. I've followed your progress with enjoyment, and look forward to doing more so in the future. Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me. I hope it was useful and maybe somewhat entertaining.
It was. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
I really love that interview with Dan. He gives you some really rich insights. And, I think out of his 4 pillars, there's a really logical way that you can compound your marketing. Really look at those, especially the design element. I think that was really critical. And I also liked his challenge to me about entertaining and useful information. I think that was really important. So you can find out more about Dan at dannorris.me, and also you can get his book on Amazon, Compound Marketing, and also the other 5 that he's got there. And also you can go to blackhobs.com.au. It's a fantastic brew if you're into craft beers. Highly recommend it. And if you really love this interview, please take a photo and mention Dan Norris on his socials. He would love you for that. It's fully transcribed. I'm sure you got your notes, but you can get all the transcription, all the links are there in the show notes. And also, if you want to know if you've got a sales machine that's going to meet your ambitions for your company, just go to paulhigginsmentoring.com/assessment. Take action to build, live, and give.
Thanks for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please share it and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.